see a place, there is a complex of buildings in that place, then all of a sudden we begin to run. The Lord puts me there, so I run. People are running for their lives. People are shouting earthquake. And we are running. A lot of walls have fallen, crumbled, and this building, the roof, big explosion over the roof. I see the roof, an explosion through the roof. An explosion through the roof. There's a gas explosion that takes place when the earthquake takes place, because we were shouting earthquake, earthquake as we were running and meeting a lot of fallen walls and glass, running to the next side. Then there was an explosion over the roof. A huge explosion over the roof of this building in this complex, in that particular complex, in the dream.
In Turkey, where at least 22 people are now dead and more than 900 injured after an earthquake in the east of the country. The quake struck near the town of Sivrica, that's about 550 kilometers east of the capital Ankara. It was followed by dozens of aftershocks, some of them almost as strong as the initial quake.
The sun rose to reveal a picture of devastation. Exhausted rescue crews working their way through the rubble, searching for survivors, still pulling people from collapsed buildings. Collapsed buildings are not the only danger. The quake also sparked a fire on the roof of this house. Authorities are warning residents not to return to damaged buildings because of the risk of further aftershocks. It will likely be days before the full extent of the damage is known. But thousands of people already know that they have no home to return to.
The grim search for survivors overseas after a deadly and powerful earthquake in eastern Turkey. The magnitude 6.7 quake destroying buildings, sending residents running into the streets. ABC's Julia McFarland reports.
Tonight, teams in eastern Turkey racing to rescue survivors still buried in the rubble. This young girl injured and trapped, a worker cradling her in his arms as she lets out a cry. A team miraculously pulling her out of the wreckage. And after a grueling 17 hours trapped in debris, an elderly woman finally pulled to safety in front of an anxious crowd. The death toll climbing tonight to at least 29, with more than 1,000 injured after the deadly 6.7 magnitude quake struck just before 9 p.m. last night. The moment caught on camera during the evening news. Hundreds of aftershocks were felt, some as far as Iran and Syria. Tonight, the search for survivors continues.
There's a gas explosion that takes place when the earthquake takes place, because we were shouting earthquake, earthquake as we were running and meeting a lot of fallen walls and glass, running to the next side. Then there was an explosion over the roof. A huge explosion over the roof of this building in this complex, in that particular complex, in the dream.
Collapsed buildings are not the only danger. The quake also sparked a fire on the roof of this house.
shouting earthquake, earthquake as we're running and meeting a lot of fallen walls and glass.
This was the precise moment the earthquake struck the province of Elazığ. This drone footage shows the extent of the devastation. Building after building, street after street, flattened by the sheer force of the quake. Survivors rushed into the streets for safety and began frantically searching through the rubble for their neighbours and friends. Local search and rescue teams set to work immediately. This elderly resident had been trapped for 17 hours inside what was left of her home. There were more than 200 aftershocks, and tremors were felt as far away as neighbouring Syria, Lebanon and Iran. Enda Brady, Sky News.
Tonight, dozens of people are dead after a powerful earthquake rocked Turkey. The magnitude 6.8 quake struck last night in eastern Elazığ province. More than 1,000 people were injured. Many others are feared trapped. Here's Mightiest Tayyip.
In the immediate aftermath of the quake, panic and confusion as first responders rushed to the scene, saving whoever they could. By sunrise, the scale of the disaster was clear. Neighborhoods devastated, homes flattened by the sheer force of the quake. Rescue teams worked in near freezing temperatures, saving, among others, this heavily pregnant woman, crying out in relief. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan rushed to the area to speak to survivors. But now it's a race against time to save those that remain buried under collapsed buildings. Mightiest, CBS News.